Thank you for joining us. I'd like to call to order the study session for the City Council for the City of Wheat Ridge, Colorado for June 1st, 2020. We will start our meeting as we do our normal meetings with citizen comment on any agenda items. So we have three items on our agenda. We get the reports and officials matters. Is there anyone from the public joining us tonight who would like to comment on any of the agenda items? You may do so now. If you would just speak up, I'd be happy to recognize you and then get your name and address and you'd be ready to speak. So is anyone joining us tonight who would like to speak on any agenda item? I don't hear anyone speaking, but I'll ask again. Is there anyone from the public, any member who would like to speak under citizens comment on any agenda items? Now is the opportunity to do so. If you could unmute your listening device and speak, I'll be happy to recognize you. All right, it doesn't look like we have anyone wishing to speak under citizens comment on agenda items. And we will go to agenda item number 1. This is ArtSpace Feasibility Study Update. And Mr. Goff, you have a staff presentation on this?
We do, and some guest, Marianne Schilling is the staff working on this, and I'll let her introduce us.
Very good, Ms. Schilling, thank you for joining us.
Hi, thank you. Good evening, Mayor and members of City Council. I am Marianne Schilling, Assistant to the City Manager. I'm here tonight with Terry Deaver, Vice President from ArtSpace Consulting. ArtSpace is a arts-focused nonprofit that helps to incorporate arts into the community through space-based projects. This may include developing art districts and creating and preserving affordable spaces for artists. ArtSpace was invited by Wheat Ridge to conduct a feasibility study to discover what the appetite for art may be in this community. So this past February, ArtSpace came to Wheat Ridge to host several focus groups, a site tour, and a community meeting in order to gather input, engage interest from Wheat Ridge artists and residents. The outcome of this visit is the preliminary feasibility report that was included in your packet. So Terry Deaver from ArtSpace will be presenting the findings of that report tonight. After the presentation, we'll both be available for questions. I'll now pass this over to Ms. Deaver.
Welcome, Ms. Deaver.
Thank you so much, and good evening, Mayor and council members. I recognize faces there. It's nice to see you all again, even from afar. So thank you for having us. We do have the presentation. I wasn't able to share my screen, so I think it's going to be run there locally. And I do want to thank you again as the city and also with Local Works as well that sponsored our visit. It's the kind of leadership that brings ArtSpace in and responds to the community need is just so essential. And so we really appreciate all of the effort you've put forth already on this and support. We can go to the next slide, please. Great. And I know Marianne just provided, Ms. Schilling just provided some information around who ArtSpace is, but I just want to reiterate, just for those of you who aren't as familiar or we didn't get a chance to meet when we were in town, just to underscore that we are a national nonprofit organization. We are a real estate developer. Our mission is to create, to foster, and to preserve affordable spaces for artists and arts organizations and small creative businesses across the country. And we focus, a lot of our real estate projects are known for our affordable live work spaces for creatives and their families. Many of them are mixed use. We mix in their nonprofit spaces, studio spaces, spaces for small creative businesses. And also on our consulting arm, we help cities and others think about and advance creative space initiatives. And we also work with individual nonprofit organizations that are challenged around space issues as well. Next slide, please. So the work that we conducted here in Wheat Ridge is focused around this preliminary feasibility study, and it's kind of our entree into communities. It's how we gather information and share information and start a community conversation. And the objective really is around kind of assessing what the assets are within the community, what the needs are for creative space, what the opportunities are. And we do this through the lens of 6 different areas, starting with the project concept. So I think Ms. Schilling had suggested that we were brought in kind of with this idea around, could an art space project be a possibility here in Wheat Ridge? So we went in there with that idea that we wanted to determine if that makes sense from an early feasibility standpoint. And so the things that we look at to help that is the creative sector. So what do your creatives and your artists say that they need in terms of space? What is their current situation? What are local leaders, both on the public sector and the private sector, how do they feel about the idea of the creative space and supporting the creative sector within your community? What kinds of funding and financing opportunities exist that we may not be familiar with, and what can we share that we know about that would be appropriate within your community? We look at sites and areas within communities, sometimes specific real estate sites, but often just around neighborhoods and kind of getting a sense of what's happening and what could happen. And we always want to know what the goals are for the broader community that could align really well with a creative sector project, even if they're not thought of traditionally as being an arts focus. Next slide. So for our work in February, we did work with a stakeholder group that was assembled locally, 9 members that worked really hard, laid the foundation for all this, did a lot of heavy lifting and making sure it's a success, that we were able to reach the community and get the information that we needed. And we looked at a lot of your planning documents, reviewed other information that was provided to us so that we could get a sense of Wheat Ridge. We're pretty familiar with Colorado in general. We've done a lot of work, but we had not had the opportunity to center in your community before. We were taken on some great tours of your community, the 38th and 44th Avenue redevelopment areas, looking at cultural assets, arts assets, new real estate investments that have happened around housing, small creative businesses, areas of public art, really getting a sense of how all of the activity in the past and current and plans for the future are weaving together throughout your community. And then we held focus groups so we could get input from the specialists and the community members within your own community. So we met with the creatives and artists, we met with folks that we would consider civic leadership and with private leadership, and then those that are working in the funding and financing fields. Next slide, please. So we want to do a close-up on a few of these areas that we focused on, and we're going to start with the arts community with the next slide, please. And it's important to understand and to recognize that the creative sector, when we talk about it, is very broad based. We often think about kind of traditional arts, performing arts, visual arts, but you can see from the list on the left, these are the areas in which creatives in your community, small creative businesses and practicing artists and cultural workers, in which they are working now. So you can see this real diversity of activity that's happening within the community. And then on the right, we asked the creative sector, the folks in our meetings, to talk to us a little bit in using one word to describe the creative sector. And you can see there's a lot of overlap, a lot of repetition, kind of interesting words that they came up with. What hidden came up repeatedly, and that was hidden between themselves in that they don't have a place to congregate, to come together, to share resources. They often meet each other outside of the cities. And also this idea that there's all this terrific creative activity happening in Wheat Ridge, but that the community regionally may not be aware of that because it hasn't risen to that level of visibility. Next slide, please. So we wanted to find out from this group what their priority space needs would be in Wheat Ridge, and performing an event space rose to the top. We understand that there's maybe not actually any existing space that works for that need in the city of Wheat Ridge right now. The idea of this affordable live workspace for the creative sector that is affordable in perpetuity, workforce housing is something that's particularly important to the creative sector. Space in which they can share their work through gallery and exhibition space. And then this concept of maker space and multimedia space, which are specialized spaces that artists can come together, share resources, share ideas, collaborate, access tools and equipment that they may otherwise not be able to afford to do on their own. There are some other particular themes that also came out of so I'm just realizing this is actually an older presentation, so that you're gonna have a little bit more detail in here. We kind of we had one that was a little bit more cleaned up, but I will say that there were these themes that came up around what other kinds of opportunities can come out of space. So this idea of preserving affordability in a otherwise rising real estate market. So people were concerned about affordability over the long term, and that this is an opportunity to lock in affordable spaces now, wanting to be able to attract creatives from other areas within the broader metro region that are leaving really expensive areas, and that there's an opportunity for Wheat Ridge to be able to capitalize on that and attract them into your community. Raising the visibility, certainly, of this local talent and small businesses that you have operating kind of just under the surface that people may not be aware of. And then just overall strengthening the city's identity. We understood that the city might be in this kind of opportunity place of being able to kind of sell itself to the broader community in different ways, and the creative sector is one way to do that. And you can see in that slide too, there was just some information that came from the creative sector around what they considered affordability to be for them. So this next slide is, we asked folks that we met with in different groups about these other goals and objectives. Some of them came out of the studies that you had done extensively within your community already, and there was a great overlap between what you already have heard from your community and the folks that we met with, that creative space for artists and the creative sector can really help to revitalize and have a focus on economic development. It is an opportunity certainly to support the cultural community. And it's also this opportunity to maybe anchor a new creative district. And we'll talk about that a little bit more in a moment. Next slide, please. And next slide. Thank you. So we wanted to talk to you a little bit about sites. Again, we looked at some specific sites, but that wasn't really our priority. We really wanted to get a better understanding of the kind of layout of Wheat Ridge and where new space might be prioritized. And certainly we would agree with what was coming out of the core group, is that the 44th Avenue and the 38th Avenue are great opportunity locations for live workspaces, creative workspaces, and the like. That the idea of focusing new space on 44th Avenue is an opportunity to really jumpstart revitalization, maybe anchor that area to be known through kind of emerging arts uses, whereas focusing new spaces on 38th Avenue will have an opportunity to help raise the visibility of the arts sector in general. But the cost of real estate is actually a little bit higher there. So you've got that trade-off of, can you get affordable spaces to be able to do that as much on the 38th Avenue, but they're both opportunity areas to be explored by the local community. We really do think that right now there's a lot of, it's really timely to be talking about this, because you've got a lot of development work in play locally, in terms of a lot of real estate kind of changing hands. You've got developers who are thinking about creative space already as part of their development projects. And so this is just a really great time to be talking with the community about this need for space. And then this concept of the creative district overlay in one of your revitalization areas to begin with. You are likely aware that the state has a certified creative district program that communities in your area and around the state have followed a certain process to be able to get to a point of being certified as a creative district. So we see this as a future opportunity for Wheat Ridge. And then on the funding and financing tools, just want to mention that in the report that you have, we do have a listing of a lot of different types of funding tools that Artspace has used in our projects, and that we've seen used in others that we know are available, that people talk to us about. But to really focus on the idea, these are typically public-private partnerships. It really takes folks on both sides to make these happen. We as a developer tend to use incentive tools like the low-income housing tax credit that helps to drive private investment from the outside into local projects. And we were hoping that the information that we provide in the report can be a resource to local developers as well. They're thinking about new creative spaces. Next slide. And I'm going to kind of, I hate to do this, I'm going to kind of go off of the presentation that I can see. So if it doesn't make sense, you'll have to ask me the questions afterward, just because I think we've framed it in a way that is clearer than this older presentation that's coming up right now. But in general, I want to say that we while we were brought in to look at one project concept, like how would an art space project work in Wheat Ridge, and does it make sense? We came away thinking that there's really kind of three project concepts that we want to recommend. So one of those is this idea that in the shorter term, the local community can really garner support and go after some smaller initiatives that can help support their needs for space, support their desire to become more visible within the community. As a second project concept is this idea of an art space project, which we do believe is valid, and would love to continue a conversation around that. It's a little bit of a longer term goal. And then the third project concept being this idea of the creative district and working towards creating a district and ultimately working towards potentially getting a certified creative district. And we wanted to make it kind of clear around how to go about all of this. So we have a step one that's outlined in the report, which is really the reconvening of the creatives that we met with, this core group, expanding on that core group with other creatives that are maybe emerging creatives, artists and creatives of color, and even people who are outside of the arts that bring in different expertise but have a commitment to seeing new space be created. And then even formalizing this group, setting an agenda, deciding what initiatives that want to be taken on, setting some timelines, kind of project managing. That is a really great way to instill a local faction that can help drive some of these projects forward. And then the second step then becomes these near-term opportunities that we identified, and they are around, and they should be on the coming slides. We've got some examples. So I don't want to go through them, but they're anywhere from asset mapping to building the infrastructure for a creative district, looking at market studies to help inform new projects. So we go to the next slide, we'll find out what's there. Great, so this is the project concept one that I mentioned, these local initiatives that could be taken, undertaken by the local community. So this asset mapping, this was actually put together very rapidly, I think on the heels of our leaving, if not while we were still there, by Melinda Stewart, one of our core group members. And it was just a quick take on who are the creative businesses in your community already that are kind of under the radar. People probably don't even recognize that they're there, and throwing them onto a map, and you start to see these clusters of activity that can really be a focus for tourism, focus for business incentives, and the focus of new real estate opportunities as well. What we're recommending is that this type of project continue to be updated over time, and maybe even starting to look at opportunity locations, vacant storefronts, or vacant spaces that are being redeveloped, and talking to developers about putting in creative uses in those projects as they align with where other clusters of creative activity are happening. And you can also start to think about the geographic boundaries around a potential cultural district when you start to see where cultural activity is happening. Next slide, please. And so this is another example of raising visibility. This is taken from Hopkins, Minnesota, which is a suburb of Minneapolis. And what they took on was finding through a competitive process, artists within their community doing a competitive process of having a design of banners, and they have placed these on their main street to let people know that they value the arts, that they have an active creative population within the city. And it's just like a quick kind of programmatic way, almost as an initiative that could be undertaken locally to help raise visibility, which is so important to your creative sector. Next slide. So this project concept too, this aligns with both a potential art space project, but then also if there are local developers that want to create spaces, whether it's studio spaces or commercial spaces or live workspaces for artists. This idea that while we gathered information from the folks that we talked to about their needs for space, we want to be able to test that against a regional market to really be able to assess demand, like how many live workspaces can you have in a community, can be supported there, what can artists across the board pay for studio space, how much space do they need, how much square footage. It's a way of quantifying it, and so that a developer can take that information and plug it into their performers and design around it. So that's sort of a next phase recommendation if you wanted to move in that direction. This example here, and there's others in the report, Bell Arts Factory is an example of a building owner in Ventura, California, who had put forth his building a family factory that they had for a potential art space project, but determined that it was really too small for the vision that we had for an art space project at that time. But he took the information from the market study that we did and translated that into his own project, where he built out studio spaces, created a nonprofit around that, has a gallery space in there, and it's become a real hub of arts activity within downtown Ventura. Next slide, please. And we wanted to just give you an example of an art space project. If you haven't been to Loveland and visited this project, it's been in operations for a while now. It's 30 live work units for artists and their families. It's all 60% or below area median income. It was a public-private partnership that included the housing authority there in Loveland, and then adjacent, we're building out incubator spaces in the old Feed and Grain spaces for arts organizations, creative businesses in there. It's one of a number of development projects that we have in and around the state of Colorado, but wanted to put that up there if anybody had questions, just so you could see an example of what an art space project might be. Next slide, please. And here are some of the funding sources, again, giving you a sense of that public-private partnership in the funding model of our projects, driving private investment, often conventional, of course, first mortgages and the like. Next slide, please. And then finally is this idea of this creative district designation. And we think that a reconvened group from the core group could set in motion by starting a conversation with the state and visiting the website and the DIY process that they have to start thinking about how do you develop a creative district, how do you put in the foundation that whether you ultimately go after a designation from the state will help to reinforce the creative community within your city just by taking on the steps that are recommended by the state. And the next slide, please. So again, so just kind of where to start. We do think that this core group reconvening and starting to think about what they want to tackle of the recommendations that are laid forth in the report makes a lot of sense. We think that there's, expanding on that group would be great, and that in general, it was just a really strong group of organizations and people at the table that were just really energized around this and had really great ideas. And we are hoping that they'll come back together and kind of run with some of the recommendations that are put in the report. And and this is an older, we have a different graphic, which you'll find in the report itself. When you look through it, I think is a little bit clearer than this, but this does provide you some timelines for those that are thinking about when can all of these things happen. We do think that some of this work could happen sooner than later. And then there's certainly longer term goals like an arts market study, an art space project that would be further down the road. Next slide, please. And yeah, and that is the end of that report.
Well, thank you very much. That is a very interesting report. We appreciate you coming to Wheat Ridge and providing your report for us. And now let's open it up to some questions. Council. Ms. Hoppy.
To staff and to Art Space Consulting for looking through this and going through this. Can you hear me?
No, not very well.
Okay, better?
Better.
Great. I just want to say thank you for all your work on this. I had looked at the grant application to become a designated creative district in Wheat Ridge. And I felt like there were some things that we already have in place, which was really great. And while it may have been a little bit of a tougher pull, 2 years ago when I looked through the whole application, I think that we have some even more stuff in place. And so I'm excited to hear that that's something that the core group may want to look at continuing in the future. So I appreciate your recommendations.
Thank you. Additional discussion. Ms. Hulteen.
Thank you. This is really just a question, and I have a dog that's like right here, so if he jumps in the call, my apologies. So is this just an update, or are you actually seeking guidance from council on or consensus on any next steps?
At this time, we're asking for feedback, and then we'll base that feedback on any next step that we'll take to council in the future.
Okay, great. Thank you. I think I probably have a couple comments, but I'm going to think about them for a second. Thanks.
Additional questions, Ms. Dozeman?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I guess my first question is if you had the opportunity to really identify not just corridors, but actual sites, because I think that that might be an issue, especially now in these times of uncertainty, as far as monies that we can allocate towards this. So I was just wondering if before we move forward any further, there were actually any areas that you had kind of identified that this might be feasible.
I'll pass this over to Ms. Deaver, but I would say that from what they've shared historically, doing the initial site tour isn't necessarily indicative of where any future location may be. It's really for the group to get a sense of where it could be and to get an idea of the personality of each corridor. And you may be able to speak to this, Terry, about what the likelihood is of the sites that we saw actually becoming the spots that are invested in the future.
Yeah, it's very true. We always recommend not getting too caught up at this early stage on a particular site. I would say that there were a lot of opportunities. That's really what we're looking for. Just in terms of we weren't looking at it specifically to say this is the site or that's the site at this time, just because some of the things that we looked at were not necessarily even on the market. Others that will have moved already before anything would get advanced. I think what we were encouraged by, though, was the fact that there appear to be owners of property and that are already actively interested in this type of concept and might be thinking about this. And we're hoping that this information will give them the impetus that they need to continue down that path. And I will say that in our experience, sites, lots of things happen in real estate. And the more focus there is on this opportunity by the core group, the more things people will hear and opportunities and partnerships truly that can arise. And so I think we're feeling feel pretty confident that something could arise even, moving forward, whether even as the market might raise up or settle down because of everything that's going on, frankly.
Ms. Dozeman?
Thank you. So I just had a follow-up question as far as staff goes. I think if we were to continue to move forward, what other funding would we be allocating at this moment, or have we already paid for the next phase?
We haven't paid for anything beyond the preliminary feasibility report, which is what was presented tonight. If council wanted us to come back with a proposal, that's when we would talk about what that could look like.
Ms. Hoppy and then Ms. Hulteen.
If I remember correctly, the creative district designation from the state has funding, has a grant funding to help you get to that creative designation. Is that true?
That is true.
Ms. Hulteen?
Thank you. Would somebody mind just kind of speaking to the role of the Cultural Commission in this? I'd like to better understand sort of the relationship between our representative cultural district that we give cultural commission that we give funding to, and a little bit more clarification on their role and what their role would look like moving forward.
I'll give you my idea of how it was started, because I was brought in after this project was initiated, but my understanding is that there were some members of the Cultural Commission that saw a presentation from ArtSpace. They were interested in the project. They presented it to the Cultural Commission, and then they went to City Council to discuss the opportunity for the ArtSpace project. So this really is a project that was initiated through the Cultural Commission after they found Local Works as a partner and funding for the preliminary feasibility study. That's what actually got this off the ground. Moving forward, I would anticipate that we do have members of the Cultural Commission who are part of the core group. I would anticipate that to continue. Beyond that, moving forward, it could really depend on what the angle would look like. I think that they would be very deeply involved. I don't know exactly what their role could look like other than being a partner. They were vital in us determining who should be invited to the focus groups and determining the artists that we should connect with. And so I think they'll continue in that role and to make sure that everybody who we know of in the Wheat Ridge community is able to be accessed through this project.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Urban?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. One thing in the report that I read that struck me is that it says creatives seek out galleries and support spaces in Denver and the surrounding communities, limiting Wheat Ridge's ability to build its own reputation for coolness, resistance to growing density, and fears over changing the laid back and quiet feel. Wheat Ridge can also work against efforts to support the creative activity. And so when I read that, I feel like Wheat Ridge has sort of an unspoken creativity to it in our landscapes and in our gardens. And if we can capitalize on the lack of density in Wheat Ridge and the canvases that we have in our gardens and our landscapes,
And Mr. Urban, we lost you. Stand by while we see about our technical difficulties.
Well, to kind of half answer what his question may have been, that's definitely something that we could pursue is connecting more strongly, more deeply into the landscaping and doing the banners, similar to what Ms. Deaver showed. If we want to do any sort of accessory art demonstration throughout the community, that's definitely something that the city can look into.
I wanted to sort of follow up on that, on maybe the project concept one. What sort of low cost or maybe pop-up events or things that we might be able to promote, on the way to develop a real estate deal? There's a lot of sort of development in the art, in our art community, and how could we support that development? Are there festivals? We're renting tents now for restaurants. Could we have artists, putting up tent shows and that sort of thing? And how might we approach that?
hello, I'm back.
We got a question on the floor, so if you'll just hang on for a minute, we'll be back with you,
Thank you.
Mr. Urban.
I'll first turn it over to Terry to talk about what some quick wins that she's seen through other communities, and then we can talk about what we could do regarding the businesses.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, there are pop-up events I've seen when downtown districts have events that are driving people to their own businesses. They've hosted artists even in their storefronts that are maybe unrelated to the arts normally, but it helps to drive business for both the creative and for the traditional business there. There is an example of a great organization that's in the report. Comes from Tacoma, it's Spaceworks, and they are a nonprofit that kind of came out of the city, in combination with their cultural affairs office at the time, and it was around finding vacant storefronts. That was an issue for them, but it can also be open spaces. We've seen things happen in spaces between buildings and in parks and otherwise. Kind of depends, how you want to activate your areas that feel less activated, but having programs around that certainly makes sense. Any kinds of dovetailed programs are perfect, and I suspect that Local Works would have a lot of great ideas because they're so immersed in that type of work, along with your cultural commission.
And then for the second question related to what we're doing for businesses right now, we did look into some sort of entertainment or a little bit of art type art adjacent. projects for this, and as it relates to CARES funding and how that's being funded, we didn't think that that would necessarily make sense, so we didn't want to put any city funds toward that at this time. However, I do think that if we connected with Local Works, as they were part of the core group, we could come back with a potential proposal for getting some arts involvement in what we're doing for outside businesses.
Okay. Thank you. Ms. Hoppy.
I'll defer if Zach comes back on, but I just wanted to ask with the, I know like with the creative district designation, and they have, like they give you, if you apply and they approve you, then they give you funding and then help you for the next couple of years, get to that place where you then are able to receive your designation. And some of the things that they look for are things like that our cultural commission's already done. So things like we've done artist tours where you can go and tour their home studios. Then they did like a performance artist tour where they had different, performance artists. It was like once a month, and they had, talk with the artists and stuff like that. And so with that in mind, and knowing where the core group was at the end of this, is it something that you think that the core group of volunteers would be able to start working down the road towards, where it wouldn't necessarily cost us any money, but we could get further to the place where we could potentially get grant funding to continue the project forward?
Yes, definitely.
Thank you. Mr. Urban, you're back with us, so I'll yield the floor.
Thank you very much. I apologize for those technical difficulties. My questions are regarding the definition of creatives and trying to differentiate Wheat Ridge from other communities and trying to make our own cool around the use of the word creatives. And in Wheat Ridge, we have a lot of existing businesses around the nursery and landscape arena, and turning gardening into an art form, or recognizing gardening as an art form, and trying to utilize that as our sort of shtick, if you will, to give us that edge, and trying to make that our uniqueness in the cultural world. Is there any discussion around that, or how we can move that element forward to encourage Wheat Ridge to stand out in that regard? Namely because as we go forward with this COVID-19 and trying to push people into enclosed spaces, it's going to be even more difficult. And I'd like to see if we can push that element forward.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. I would say one of the common threads of the art space visit was the city's urban ag vibe. So I do think that it would be consistent with what we've discussed and what everybody already knows is going on in Wheat Ridge. Terry, do you have anything else you'd like to add?
No, but I think that's exactly right. And I think thinking about ways like that works already with what you have as an asset within your community, in particular, given the particular time, I think that's exactly what you should be thinking about. That's great.
Ms. Dozeman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I'm a little concerned just with everything that's been going on about moving forward and allocating any funds towards this at this moment. And so until we have a better idea of where we're at on the other side of COVID, I'm not sure that I would necessarily want to just forge ahead at this moment. But if we were to go ahead and move forward, I think that I would want the Housing Authority to be a part of that core group. So Rachel and I had discussed about like that originally being their purpose is for affordable housing in our community, and whether we could reactivate them and allow for them to be a part of this conversation and have more of a purpose and more of a voice. And so if we were to move forward, I would really encourage staff to bring them into this conversation and have them be a little bit more of that core group, and seeing how maybe we could benefit from this in our own community as far as the Housing Authority goes.
Thank you, Ms. Weaver.
Thank you. Ms. Deaver, would you mind just speaking to the combination of what Mr. Urban was talking about? I have also seen in other states and other places the combination of sort of the growing creativity, like exhibits on farms in the middle of fields, that we can really sort of go beyond just one form of creativity, and oftentimes we can bring them together. Could you just talk about, I'm just aware of a couple of the art space things that have happened around the country, and I was just wondering if you could speak to that a little bit.
Sure. I always gotta go back to the inspiration of your own creatives, because they are always far more creative than I am in terms of being able to think about what makes sense and what resources they have. But yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that's come up, which was mentioned earlier in Colorado generally, and in your community specifically, is that ag culture component, the culinary arts, artisanal foods and tinctures and products and that type of thing, as well as an opportunity around creative businesses and supporting that type of work, as well as something more broadly, which is, I think, maybe what you're thinking about is perchance is the idea of even like sculpture opportunities that are out in fields. We have one in it's Minnesota, Wisconsin area as an example, where it draws people out in a way that they can socially distance,
Right.
but also really brings awareness in a unique way to the artists within the community. And those are exactly the kind of ideas that I think that the core group, if they were given or internally came up with a directive about like what can we do in today's time and with the resources that we have that would be distinctive and calls to our talents, and to be able to come up with 2 or 3 things that seem to make sense and kind of to go forth in making that happen. But I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, I just wanted
but I think there's
yeah, I was just hoping you'd mention those kinds of installations, that there's crossover between the different creatives as well. Thank you.
Absolutely, yes.
Thank you. Mr. Goff, did you have your hand up?
I did. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to plug a current program that's going on. And Mr. Mayor, you mentioned pop-up events, and the Wheat Ridge Cultural Commission and Local Works has implemented their annual chalk art program. And their first event was at the Wheat Ridge Recreation Center, which welcomes our child care program and the kiddos that all came today. I think there's 50 kids in camp today. So there was chalk art in front of the rec center, which was great, by an artist, local artist, Olivia McLeod. And we have several other chalk art events planned for the rest of the summer, June 14th, the week of July 12th, and the week of August 9th. So that is, Kate, I know Kate Cook with Local Works was on the phone. She didn't get a chance to mention this under Citizens' Right to Speak. So just wanted to make council aware of this, that we do have a great art program going on right now.
Thank you, Ms. Hoppy, and Ms. Hulteen after that.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I agree with Councilwoman Dozeman about not spending money necessarily right now. I would, though, I don't necessarily want to stop the group in their tracks. And so if there were some activities that are, that have relatively not any expense to it, or again, looking towards something where we can get grants to pay for some of our activities, then I would really like to see if council would like to kind of give them that charge to kind of move forward to bring these into our community, and to maybe kind of organize the heavy art community that we already have a little bit, make it a little bit more organized.
Ms. Hulteen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think I'm going to echo what we've just heard from Councilmember Dozeman and Hoppy. First of all, anyone who knows me knows I love art. I love community art, and would love nothing more than Wheat Ridge to become really a much more tangibly vibrant arts community. And I think something that's been brought up several times in this discussion is that, the arts and the artists in our community are varied. Everything. I love that you mentioned culinary arts, and So I'm excited for any type of opportunity to make that more tangible and visible, and really to support those artists. I think there's, fundamentally a lack of convening spaces. I think, when we're looking at supporting them as, successful artists, professional artists, I think, Wheat Ridge really, I think, could use a little bit more support and focus on ways to do that. So I'm really enthusiastic if we can look at, programming aspects or access to, capital, whether it's, supporting grants or even providing micro grants. I'd really like for us to take the energy that's come out of the working group. And, I think what we've learned is our community loves our artists and would like to see more of it. I'm just super, super cautious and hesitant around any type of capital investment. I understand that, when we're looking at brick and mortar type work, that takes time and it takes leadership and commitment. And I understand that there's some momentum around that, but I just feel like we have rapidly changing market environments. We have a lot of uncertainty that we're operating with in our community right now. And maybe the best thing we can be doing for our artists is to, help make them more visible. I would strongly support looking into a creative district. So I guess my preference would be to, pivot and look more at the programmatic aspects, which I think have more visible and immediate impacts on our cultural commission or cultural community right now, and maybe step back on anything that's looking at a significant capital investment until we have a better sense of a lot of those funding mechanisms. I'm not sure what those are going to look like in a couple of years, given sort of the national and local financial situation. So that said, yay arts, more of it. I wish we were talking about arts at every city council meeting. So that's my dream. Thank you so much for all your work, everyone.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Ms. Nosler-Beck.
Thanks, Mayor. I just wanted to also say that I appreciated Councilwoman Dozeman's comments about the affordable housing component and attainable housing component of this plan. I was on the Cultural Commission when Art Space first was presented, and at least from the Commission's standpoint at that juncture, which was a couple of years ago now, it was an awesome opportunity because it incorporated so many different aspects, kind of two birds, one stone, with incorporating the arts and affordable housing. I think this is a great opportunity because of what we're in the midst of with the COVID epidemic and crisis happening, to take a step back and figure out a way to address the inclusionary housing and the affordable housing components of this, and how we as a city want to address this issue, so that when we are in a place where we can make capital investments, we have these components in place. And so I just wanted to second what Councilwoman Dozeman said, that I'd like to look into reactivating the affordable housing component within the city. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't see any more hands. Why don't we sort of wrap up our discussion on this one? I'd like to really thank Ms. Deaver for bringing us today with Ms. Schilling. We have a really vital core group and a number of citizens that have participated in this. As I think about it, we're going to be coming out of this COVID emergency with a different world view, in a sense, and a different way that we organize our communities. We're also in the midst of a neighborhood engagement process that and we're looking at ways to help our businesses and our communities heal out of this pandemic. And maybe if we were to sort of be able to put not an art necessarily a focus, but an art lens on our vision that we may, when we talk about communities and talk about neighborhoods, how do we integrate arts into our neighborhood? How do we reach out to artists in the neighborhood and understand what the city or a group may be able to help them with, and also how they might be able to bring bring their assets and their creativity to other parts of the city. And, you know, just thinking as a local businessman, how could I integrate art? You know, we've got, as Mr. Goff mentioned, chalk art out, you know, at the rec center now. Does chalk art work on our corridors, or how might we, you know, get local art things going that are, as most of you said, not an expensive proposition, because I don't think we're into, you know, a place where we can really expend a lot of finances. But there's a lot of opportunity there, I think, and I want to thank you for bringing this to us. So, and thanks to the group that put it all together. So, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think we've received a lot of good direction. We'll reconvene the committee and look at adding maybe some housing authority members, and based on what we heard tonight, we'll bring back some recommendations on how we can maybe move forward.
Thank you very much. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you very much.
All right, we will go on to agenda item number 2. This is a discussion on parkland fees, and we've got Mr. Johnstone with us. Mr. Goff, do you want to kick us off on this one?
Yeah, well, I'll just turn it over to Mr. Johnstone to keep it quick.
Well, that was pretty direct.
Yeah.
But very effective.
Well, good evening, Mayor and Council. Somewhat random topics for this evening, but we're here tonight to talk to you about our kind of framework for the city's residential parkland fee structure. Wheat Ridge, so maybe start off with just a little background and context before we get to what we're asking for your direction on this evening. Wheat Ridge, like almost all cities in urban areas, has a requirement in our subdivision regulations that new residential development either contribute a dedication of parkland or pay a fee in lieu of such dedication. Because most developments in Wheat Ridge of late, in the recent past and moving forward, are small, what we call infill projects, the required land dedication would typically be very small, creating spaces that would not be terribly useful, and also, you know, very expensive to maintain. Just, you know, potentially lots of little really micro pocket parks. Because of that, in the recent past and moving forward, our Parks Department has typically requested the city utilize the fee in lieu of land dedication option versus actually getting dedicated parkland as part of residential subdivision approvals. We have updated our code in this regard fairly recently in 2014, and I can elaborate on the context for why we did that if there are questions, but we updated the formula in 2014 with a code amendment of the subdivision regulations. That code amendment also established that the timing for payment of the fee in lieu of land dedication was to be paid at the time of recordation of the subdivision plat, which I can discuss a little further in a moment. That's one of the substantive questions that we have for you. But also as part of that code update, we also commissioned a study of residential land valuations that was to be used kind of integral to how that fee was calculated. And that's really the second substantive question. And again, I'll get a little more into that in a bit. And I have one of my senior planners on the call, I hope, yeah, there she is, to talk about some research that she's done recently that's very Wheat Ridge specific. Yeah, at the time that we did that land valuation study back in 2014, there were very few Wheat Ridge specific residential transactions that we could use as data points to create the basis for that fee. And since 2014, as you're probably aware, there have been probably dozens of land transactions for residential properties for development in Wheat Ridge that give us a much better context of what the residential land values look like in Wheat Ridge. So we'll go into that in a bit. So again, the two questions that we have for you are: one, potential code amendment pertaining to the timing of the payment of the fee in lieu of land dedication, and two, discussion of if and when City Council would want to entertain by resolution an update to the residential land valuation data, which would impact what the actual fee in lieu amounts that are paid by builder developers would be. But first, let me get into the code amendment. We're recommending that council consider a code amendment that would establish the park fee in lieu be paid in association with building permits rather than at the time of subdivision plat recordation. And there's a few reasons for that. One, the actual kind of impacts to the park system from new residential development really doesn't occur until a building permit is pulled and a home is built and occupied by people that use our parks. So that's the first reason. The second reason is that as a practical matter, the payment of the fees by a builder developer is really more logically associated with the building permit. That's when they pay fees for water taps and building permits and plan review and sewer taps. So that's kind of when the transaction really occurs. And again, when the actual impact occurs. And lastly, in terms of why we're recommending that minor timing change, is that it means that the fee will be paid based on the most current land valuation that the city has adopted. So, you know, a subdivision might be approved in 2020 as a subdivision, but that land might not actually get developed until 2030. And that land valuation impact in 2030 could be very different. So we think that's a more equitable kind of way to approach it as well. So that's the background for why we're proposing council direction on a potential code amendment that would just have that little tweak in the subdivision regulations that would establish that the park fee in lieu be paid at the time of building permit as opposed at the time of subdivision plat recordation. In terms of the update to the land valuation data, we have done some initial research on a variety of recent land transactions that have occurred between 2015 and present day. And Stephanie, I think, has some documents that she can pull up and screen share to go over that data.
Yep. Thanks, Ken. Good evening, Mayor and council members. I'm Stephanie Stevens, a senior planner with the City of Wheat Ridge Community Development Department. And I'm going to walk through that residential land valuation analysis. It was provided in your memo packet, and I will also share my screen now so that you have quick reference to it. Okay, so just to quickly walk you through it. So the analysis that we undertook is preliminary in nature. It's basically just based on the assessor data that was available on land sale transactions for 14 sites that are within the City of Wheat Ridge that have either recently received entitlements or are currently pursuing entitlements for new residential development. So that's the 14 sites here. The proposed use is really that residential classification, whether it be anything from single family detached, duplexes, and townhome sites is what the 14 sites entail. The sale price that is pulled directly from the assessor's data. It's based on the unimproved value of land. And I think that's an important piece of this puzzle. And if we receive direction to look into this further, that would be a data point that we would need to do further analysis on just to make sure that we're getting that unimproved value in there. As Ken mentioned, it's based on sales that occurred between 2015 and 2019. And then in terms of land area, you're looking at sites that range from single family detached at only 8,200 square feet in size up to sites that encroach into 14 acres for those larger townhome sites. So it gives you a good indicator of what kind of development has gone on since that 2014 code adoption for these subdivision regulations and the parkland dedication piece. The key data point here is really that price per square foot of land in the last column. That's where we get the where they initially found the median that resulted in the data point for our formula for parkland fees that were adopted by that resolution. So as you can see, taking from more recent data versus in 2014, they took data more from surrounding municipalities than our own because we didn't have a lot to go off of in our city, but now we do. So based on the data that we pulled, just preliminarily, we're looking at a substantially increased sales price per square foot. So right now the mean is looking at $24.18 per square foot, and the median is looking at $23.68 per square foot, compared to that data from 2014 that was actually included in our formula, which is that $3.64 per square feet. So one other thing I did want to note as well is that our population density factor is also a part of that formula, and that was taken from the 2010 census data. And since the census is also being updated right now, that might also be a data point to consider for some revision if we do end up pursuing any further analysis on this. And while we understand that this might not be the best time to explore increasing fees, it is something that jumped at us as a big change since 2014. So we're just bringing it up as a topic of consideration. So with that, that concludes my summary. I'm here for questions, and I'll turn it back over to Ken. Thanks.
Thanks so much, Stephanie. So yeah, glad to obviously take questions here. Again, this is not a topic that we chat with you all about with any frequency, so would anticipate that you might have some questions, but really requesting direction in two regards. Most importantly, whether you would be supportive of a code amendment that would just tweak that timing to be coincident with building permit rather than recordation of the subdivision plat, which would be a fairly minor ordinance code amendment. And then two, any thoughts you may have on, you know, if and when we would want council to consider a resolution that would modify the assumption for residential land valuation. And I just kind of overarching comment on that. I mean, the presumption would certainly not be that if we did change that fee, that it would somehow have to go up to that maximum value of what the median and the mean that Stephanie summarized. There certainly could be some, you know, point in between that could be more appropriate. And with that, we're glad to answer questions.
Well, thank you for that presentation. And Ms. Stevens, thank you for joining us tonight. We'll open it up for questions from council. Ms. Hutchinson.
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Johnstone, I have a question. Have there been any developers who have not paid? It said in here it was difficult to track. So if you have property and they didn't do a development for 10 years, how do you know if they, you know, paid or not?
Yeah, thanks for the question. I don't believe so. The difficult to track is that in some cases, historically, prior to even the 2014 ordinance, we had different agreements with different developments in terms of, you know, whether the fee was required at the time of subdivision versus building permits. And that's one of the reasons for the recommendation that we do it at building permits. I mean, that's a time when we're used to collecting fees, and builders, developers are used to paying fees. So that we think is a cleaner tracking mechanism. But I don't think there's been instances where we've in any significant way. I mean, is there anomaly? Sure, there could be, but were there been any significant lapses in getting the payments for that subdivision parkland fee in lieu?
Well, I just wanted to ask that, but I do agree that at building permit time, to be consistent, that everybody gets treated kind of the same kind of a thing, and then it's easier to track, I think. But also, if it hasn't been updated since 2014, the way real estate goes, I would advocate looking at that more frequently than in 6 years. Because we don't know, you know, that's real estate really changes very quickly. That's just my comment.
Thank you.
Thank you. Additional questions? Ms. Hoppy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It doesn't look like there's a lot of questions. It's pretty straightforward. And so I thought that maybe I'd just ask for a consensus to go ahead and move our topic down the road and see if there's a consensus for staff to proceed with amending the subdivision regulations to require payments of fee in lieu of parkland dedication to be made prior to building permit issuance for all development, including new subdivision.
Can you raise your hand if you're in favor of that as a consensus? It looks like we do have consensus on that, and strongly so. So, Mr. Johnstone, hopefully that answers the two issues that you were looking for clarity tonight.
It definitely answers the first one. I guess
Okay.
the second one would just be,
Well,
would council want to entertain an agenda item at some point in the future, and if so, when, that would update the fee amount effectively based on updating the what we believe to be the residential land valuation figure.
thank you, and I'll go back to Ms. Hoppy.
Well, I was just going to ask for a consensus for staff to bring back to study session an updated figure used for residential land valuation based on more recent comps.
Do we have consensus on that? Okay, we've got two questions down. Thank you very much. Anything else out there that we need to clarify on this issue? All right, thank you very much for joining us. We appreciate having you here.
Thank you.
Okay. With that, we will go to our third agenda item, which is a potential land exchange at Stites Park. Mr. Goff, we have Lauren Mikulak with us tonight. I saw her earlier today, but perhaps you have a report. There she is, right there.
Yep. Lauren gonna handle this, kid?
Okay, Lauren.
She is, Patrick.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you. Good evening, Mayor and Council. I know we just shared that we rarely get parkland dedication in the form of actual land, but in this case, we do have a unique fact pattern and that potential to expand one of our parks by a small sliver. So this evening, I want to share my screen in a moment to walk you through a series of images that I think visually explain that opportunity at Stites Park. It would clean up discrepancies at the shared lot line. I included 2 images in the memo, but I realized today that it's really a series of 4 that maybe better explain that issue. Let's get that pulled up. Okay, can you see my screen? Any head nod?
I can see it.
Perfect. Okay, thank you. So I've just got, like I said, 4 images, and here you can see Stites Park. It's at the northwest corner of 29th Avenue in Newland. This image in the bright blue is showing the current property lines of the park as well as the adjacent private property at 6675 West 29th Avenue. That private property has a large parcel to the west of the park, and then it also has a narrow pole that has long been under the same ownership that extends out to Newland. So you can see in this image that Stites has a ball field. It's only for children to use given the proximity and the length of the outfield to that private property. You can also see that it has a basketball court and a playground area that extend into that private property on the north end. The owner of 6675 was in discussion with staff a couple years ago. They didn't end up advancing any plans at that time, but they did work with our former Parks and Rec director to replace that old chain link fence that divided the property. The newer fence, you can just barely see the shadow line of, if you can see my cursor, to the east of that blue line. It follows the historical fence line in part because there's mature trees there in the area that are sort of exactly on the property line. And what you can see in this image is that that fence and the property line are not aligned. The fence is within the park. The previous owner partnership that we had been working with a couple years ago dissolved, and the current owner was recently back in touch with our staff, which is why we're bringing this to you now. The possibility essentially of correcting these discrepancies through a land exchange. So in this image, I've shaded 2 tracks, track day on the north end. If that were to be deeded from the private owner to the city, all park improvements would obviously then be on city property. On the west end, it's this very skinny orange sliver. If that was to be deeded, the fence line would then match the property line. This third image is showing those same tracks, but with what could be the future property lines where the fence and the property line are one and the same, and States Park then includes all of its improvements. And then lastly, what those property lines would look like without that shading. So again, we're bringing this to you tonight to seek consensus on whether or not to move forward. In this case, the net gain for the park would be about 2,000 square feet. That was clear that the green was larger than the orange. Despite it being a net gain, that small sliver here on the west side of the park would need to follow the process in the city charter regarding the disposition of parkland. So that's approval by ordinance with a unanimous vote of the full council, which is why we wanted to preview that and make sure that was something you wanted to proceed with. That's all I have for tonight, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Mikulak. Good, concise presentation. We'll open it up for questions from council. Ms. Dosman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So it looks like we are attempting to gain ownership of Tract A, but currently the park already uses some of that property.
That's correct.
How does that work?
You know, I haven't dug into those files. I think that's not it's not rare in Wheat Ridge that we have sort of old lot lines that through some sort of a survey bust were incorrectly assumed to be, you know, another person's property. So I think Joyce had done Joyce Manwaring, our former Parks and Rec director, had done quite a bit of research to try to figure that out and had determined that there wasn't really an answer at the end of it, and this is probably the easiest way to clean that up.
Okay, and we had seen a comment by a resident as far as moving the fence line in Tract B and whether that would affect those trees in the area. Could you maybe speak to that?
Sure. Yeah. You can see in the aerial imagery that I was showing that they see the sort of shadow of some trees. I don't know the species or health of those trees. They are right on the property line. We don't have a tree protection ordinance, and it's not something we've talked about with the current owner of sort of what any site development plan would look like relative to those specific trees. So it's certainly something we could discuss with them. Currently, there are trees that are in either on the park property or right on the property line. So I don't know that anyone's done an assessment of what the health is, but we could request that.
But after the lands, the fence doesn't move any. The fence becomes the new property line.
Right. The fence is in its current location because it was trying to have the least impact on the trees. So the fence would become the new property line.
Does the fence itself become the new property line, or a line very close to the fence become the new property line? Or is the fence is it straight enough to where it would fall all on a property line?
It's fairly straight. I think there's one imperceptible tangent. I haven't seen the survey since the new fence was built a couple years ago, but we would make sure that if we were to proceed, we'd sort of correct all those issues so it wasn't an issue in the future.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right, additional discussion. Ms. Hulteen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I don't know how pertinent this is, but how does the land exchange impact the possibilities for developing the vacant lot? Does it, I mean, it seems like it would, anyway, I'm just sort of curious if that land calculation or any of the lot dimensions actually ultimately impact the developability of the lot.
I don't think that they do. I mean, the lot is oversized residential 2 property right now. They wouldn't have been able to develop anything on that pole portion because of its substandard width. And this is frankly at the request of the private property owner to clean up these discrepancies. So I don't think they have a concern about that either.
Great, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Additional discussion, Mr. Urban, and then Ms. Hutchinson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As it relates to parkland dedication, there's nothing in relationship to any development that they're looking at needing to dedicate parkland in this regard. There's no connection there, correct?
They're exploring some development opportunities under the current R2 zoning. So if that were to result in the addition of new units, then the net parkland could be fulfilling some of that requirement. We'd have to do the calculation to see if it fulfills all of the parkland dedication requirement or if some fee would also be owed.
Okay, that was my next question as to how, we don't need that tonight, but understanding how does that get calculated? Can they pay a portion of the fee and dedicate parkland as well, or
Yeah.
does it have to be one or the other?
Nope, it can be partial. We've done that fairly recently, actually, in a couple projects. Like Toll Brothers had a small publicly accessible park that counted toward a portion, and then they paid a fee for the balance.
And then would the tract, I think that's tract A, the one on the north side, would that then be platted or otherwise connected to the park, or would that continue to be a separate tract, or how does that get sort of melded into the park itself?
Sure. We wouldn't need to consolidate what would then be the two parcels that make up States Park. So there'd be no need for that expense. It would essentially be comprised of the larger park property and then that single tract A, which would be fine.
Okay, and any reason why that, so in that tract A, as it extends westward onto the property owner's property, it looks like that's also segregated off?
Right, so that would be, because it's already separated from the main parcel, that's how it would remain, sort of unless and until they decide to subdivide that property further, then they would presumably clean that up on their own property if they needed to, based on whatever future development pattern might be.
So is that originally supposed to be an alleyway for those houses to the north, or what was, do you have any indication as to why that?
You know, we have aerials that date back to the 80s, and it's not clear. It must be in an earlier aerial.
Okay, thank you.
Additional discussion?
Mr. Mayor, we are asking Jefferson County Open Space if there's any issues, since this is a Jefferson County purchased by Jefferson County Open Space. So we haven't heard back from them yet, but we'll follow up on that and make sure there's no issues with them.
Mr. Stites.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Is there, if we, and I think we should, but if we don't do the land exchange, is there, because we already have half of a basketball court and a playground on that property, is there a potential that we might be charged rent for using that, or some sort of penalty or anything like that?
You know, that has not come up. I don't know the answer to that. If we didn't proceed, the conversation that we have had is whether the owner would want to move the fence so that they didn't have to park on their property. But we hadn't discussed the alternative scenario of the park encroachment.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Okay, Ms. Hutchinson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. What about statute of limitations? Does that have anything to do with this at all?
Sometimes there are sort of prescriptive rights, like a improvement, like a basketball court has been there long enough that it should be the park property. I don't know that we meet that because I think some of these improvements are relatively recent, but I haven't looked into that. Yeah.
But when I look at the picture, okay, and the fence line that's on the north side of these properties, part of it is wood, and then there's some that's like chain link. So what, like for track A, what is the width here that we're talking about? How much?
I think it's about 15 feet wide.
So the property line right now is at the very top of what you're showing in the diagram?
The city's property line goes right through the basketball court.
Pardon me?
The city's property line goes right through the basketball court. It's the south side of tract A.
Okay, how will this affect the fencing for the people who live on the other side?
I see. Would have no impact. So the very northern portion of tract A would not be moving at all. So there would be no change to those fences, which are likely sort of individually owned by those property owners.
Okay, because I know that playground was just redone a couple years ago. I mean, 4 or 5 years ago or something like that.
Yeah, no plan to change any of the actual physical improvements by virtue of this exchange.
Mhm. And then you don't know about the trees then that are on the north side of the park?
No.
They shouldn't be affected, or you don't know?
With the trees that are fully within the park on the north side would not be affected.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Any additional discussion? Do we have a consensus? It looks like sort of the direction we're looking for. Oh, Ms. Hulteen.
Sorry, I thought you were asking for consensus.
Oh, well, do we have consensus to have, to move forward with this land swap? We have consensus to move forward with the land swap the way you've described it. Thank you so much for a good presentation.
Thank you.
Okay. I think that's it on our study session. Let's see. For staff reports, going to Mr. Goff.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a couple of quick items. Maybe Mr. Urban will give an update on the business grant program, but we've also just implemented a new business assistance program to help businesses with the reopening plan. And Local Works is helping us with that, and it's essentially helping businesses. It'll provide reimbursements for a lot of different items that a business may need to reopen during this next phase of Safer at Home. So if you know a business that might need some help, a tent, chairs or tables or disinfectants, just a lot of different things are eligible that a business may use to get their business reopened. We will be using CARES Act funding to help businesses with those expenses. So a great program. It just came out at the end of last week. So we're getting the word out to all the businesses, but please share that. I think I sent you an email over the weekend too, so share that with anybody. The governor just released a new executive order today, and the CDPHE, Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment, is working on guidance for this new executive order. And the governor's going to have a press conference, I believe, tomorrow to discuss, but the guidance from the health department won't be out until I think Wednesday or maybe even later. They're asking, our staff has an opportunity to provide comment on that, because a lot of the changes the governor is proposing have to do with outdoor rec, swimming pools, playing fields and different things like that. So we should have a little bit more information in the next few days on how we can transition into that in Wheat Ridge with our recreation center and our pools and our outdoor fields. So we'll keep you in the loop on that. And with that, at this point, I would like to get some kind of sense from City Council too, how much longer you would like to continue with virtual City Council meetings. The Safer at Home orders still require group sizes to be 10 or less. Allie and her team have been working on a hybrid approach where we could potentially make that happen in a council chambers. It would be somewhat difficult though. We probably can't have the full council in the council chambers, and staff and citizens and socially distance at the same time. Council would not, we couldn't have you all up on the dais. Some cities are doing this. They're doing some hybrid approaches, but there is an option to do that if you would like to start meeting in council chambers. Or I would like to know if you would like to, at least through June, all of our meetings in June, continue with full virtual meetings until we get more guidance from the health department. So any thoughts on that?
Ms. Dozeman.
So is there not a way in which we could set up the tables and the dais in which we would be able to distance ourselves and then require masks of the citizens until they get to the podium? I mean, I'm not sure what sanitation and, disinfecting rules might apply as far as residents speaking. So I'm sure that is potentially an issue, but I feel like our council chambers, especially if we remove that wall, in between the two chambers? I mean, is there any recording capabilities on that other side?
Yeah, I think that's the biggest challenge. And if Allie's on here, she could speak to it too. But I think since we televise our meetings, we have to make sure that we're in the areas where the cameras can pick you all up. We could split you up so that you are 6 feet apart, but that would mean part of you would be on the dais and part of you could be at other tables, or you're all at tables, I guess, like a study session and split across, but then you don't have your voting machine. You don't have your monitors. So there's a lot of challenges, not that it can't happen. There's a lot of audiovisual stuff we would have to work through, but as I mentioned, Allie and her team have been working on it very hard. We tested it a little bit today, and I think they're having some issues with the sound, but it's something if council really wants to do it, we can make it work.
Additional discussions, Mr. Stites and then Ms. Hoppy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, on that, what does that look like as far as public comment goes and things like that? Is that people sitting in an audience, or is that people coming in via Zoom, or like we're in a chamber and they're coming in via Zoom? How does that work?
It could be a combination. Again, we'd have to limit the number of people in the chambers though to 10 or less. And so we could have a queuing system where maybe if there's a lot of speakers, they could be queued in. So that we keep the limits at where they're at. And the governor may well change this in the next few days. We don't know yet exactly if he's going to address group size. I don't think he is. The Jefferson County Health Department is asking for some variances on group size, I believe. So that may take a while before we know though if those are approved. So yeah.
What, as some of those other cities are going either back fully into council chambers or hybrid, what are they doing specifically? Do you guys have an idea of that?
Yeah, again, they're I think everything that I just kind of mentioned, they're splitting council up. Some are on the dais, some are at tables, some are on the dais, and some stay home and virtually call in. So half of you would be on the dais and half would be at home as you are today. And they're just spacing chairs out for visitors so that they're 6 feet apart. And then they're doing health screenings when they come in, making citizens wear masks and different things like that, and sanitizing any high touch points.
Okay. So that would pretty well limit what we can do as far as like if we have a public hearing like we do here at our next meeting. I think that's going to be pretty well attended, I would imagine. That might be pretty difficult, I would think. I would like to get back in person as soon as possible. If there's a way that at least the 9 of us and some staff can be in the room together, and then maybe we can figure out public comment and stuff in a different way. But if we can, I know business is getting back to normal. We should try to do that too.
And also I forgot to mention, we are starting with the June 8th meeting. We are going to provide an opportunity for citizens. If council still wants to continue the June 8th meeting, which I think we have to because we already publicized the public hearing as a virtual meeting. We're going to provide an opportunity for citizens who may not have the ability to use technology or just don't like it to come to City Hall, socially distancing, of course, and using masks to come to City Hall and provide comment at the diet or at the podium as they would if there was a meeting in person. You'll be able to hear them and see them, and they'll be able to hear and see you on the screens in the council chambers. So starting June 8th, we are going to provide that ability.
Thank you. And Patrick,
Go ahead.
Mayor, might I just add on to that? And so that is, it's going to be, I think, a really good test of what we can accomplish there. But just keeping in mind that at this point we are dealing with no more than 10 people in a room. So that's me, right? I'll be in there plus 9, and we're asking folks to RSVP. And so Denitza will talk to people to make sure that they're free of symptoms, and that they honestly really do need to come and not save that spot for somebody else who really might be struggling to participate virtually. Does that make sense? So at this point, we're still following those guidelines of the numbers, you know, and it's going to be hard to allow more people more access until we get past that.
Thank you. I have Ms. Hoppy and then Mr. Urban.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think it's exciting to hear that we are able to add one more layer of something for our citizens to be able to be involved. My concern is that the number of people, it would be really hard to say, well, because we already have all the counselors and the staff here, that we only can allow 4 citizens, you know, so then at the door, we're stopping people, and where they could have maybe already made different plans to call in or email or something like that. But if we, I don't know if we could do something where it's kind of like a 10 in, 10 out, or, you know, if there's really that many people or something like that. But I think that it's more congruent if we're all, either we're all in the same room or we're all on Zoom, instead of some of us on Zoom and some of us in the room in, you know, on the dais and at tables and then in Zoom. I think it's more congruent for it to be kind of where we're, as a body, we're in one place, but we try to open it up as much as we can for our citizens to be able to kind of do this hybrid thing. So I'd like to see how it happens, how it goes on June 8th, and hopefully it's successful, and then maybe we would have more direction from, maybe we can have a larger number of people in a room or something like that. It will also be kind of hard too when we're at, some of us on the dais and some of us on the tables, but you know, if we can make it so that the citizens can see our faces, I think it would be good. But for me, I'm all right with, I was looking at the future tentative items, and I think that through kind of through June, we're in pretty good place, except for June 22nd, which may have some heavy participation, but I think we can at least go through June 13th. Wait, am I looking at the right one? July, sorry. I think we can at least get through, you know, June 15th and revisit it if people aren't comfortable with saying, yeah, let's just cut the ties for all of June. We can at least get through June 15th. So that's just my comment.
Mr. Urban.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. You know, the trying to figure out how to do it, I would agree that we should either be all on Zoom or all face-to-face. It's going to be difficult just from a communication dynamic to have those in the room will just be talking to each other versus everybody on Zoom, and it may be difficult to have not that this is an easy communication platform to use, but it works for our purposes now. Is there any consideration or logistics around holding a council meeting in Hayward Park at all, or having tents set up in the parking lot in any way, or anything along those lines?
Yeah, I don't know if we've thought about that, Allie. It probably would be difficult we wouldn't be able to live stream, I don't think, the video or the council meetings on Channel 8. I think we could probably record and then replay them. I'm not sure if Allie, if you know that off the top of your head. So there's the audio video that we would have to think through.
Aren't we doing it right now though?
We are, but we're patched directly into the closet where the Channel 8, where everything is. It actually all runs through the Channel 8, the closet behind the dais there, and also that podium computer. So if you went to your showing all non-video participants, you would see like 3 versions of Jesse Johnson, basically. That's how that all works. And I'm thinking about that. I mean, you know, we'll explore every opportunity. I think the thing to consider is that what's our goal? Is it most participation? And how do you feel about those that have really successfully managed to call or Zoom in to these meetings, you know? And is that important to you to consider and to continue?
Thank you. I have Mr. Stites and then Ms. Hutchinson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I actually kind of like the idea of a traveling city council meeting if we can figure that out. But when we're doing fitness classes, even if we were to take our classes out to the park, we can still only have a certain amount of people. Does that still applies even if we're in a park, doesn't it? You can still only have a group of 10 people or less.
I think so. I think in the Jefferson County Public Health variance request, they're asking for a variance for large, I think groups up to 50. Do you remember what that said, Ally? So depending on what happens with that, if that's approved or not, there might be an opportunity for larger group sizes outside, but we don't know yet if that's going to be approved.
If we all join the same Little League team, we might be able to pull it off.
Yeah.
Well, we have a big league field also. Ms. Hutchinson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. No matter what we do, we still need to do the social distancing. Okay, I don't think that's going to go away for a while. I don't know if City Hall would be open for people who would be able to come in and speak at a public meeting. Is there a way that they would be able to see, if we were doing Zoom or being at home, that they could see us in the chambers?
Yep.
Not that they're talking in front of a mic or something, you know, but also what they're doing at some stores are they count how many people go in and they don't let any people go in till some came out. So you could still manage like 10 people, but you still have to do the social distancing. So, and I don't think that would be an issue, you know, because this would all get kind of recorded anyway. Would they not be able to see all this public speaking on Channel 8?
Ms. Hutchinson, let me tell you, I previewed the what we're planning to do next Monday night. And the way it's going to work is that council is going to be on a Zoom format, just like we are here. Ally and her team are going to be in the council chambers, and any member of the public, a citizen who wants to speak, either under citizens' right to speak or on any of the agenda items, can sign up before the meeting and then come to City Hall and stand at the podium and speak to us, and we will see the video feed on the screens that we're seeing now, and the speaker in the city council chamber will be able to see all of the councilors and what's happening on the screen, on a large screen at over the dais, right? It would be the roll down screen. So the people who may not have the technology or wanted to participate in person would have that ability to come and talk to us.
Because I think that's more of the issue of people going into the chambers, even more than us being there, because we can do the meetings this way.
Right.
But what the citizens want is they want to get in there because they don't have the technology, or even if they do call in, we can't see who they are.
Right. And this, the way they've got it set up, very well done, is that we would be able to see them standing at the podium, just like we would see them in real life, only it's on a video screen. You know, it's not the same, but you understand.
Yeah. Well, that's good tech. Okay. Mm-hmm. That's good.
Okay. Ms. Hulteen. And then
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So first of all, I really like that the city is looking at the option starting next Monday to expand opportunities for citizens. I think we've heard concerns about the Zoom format. I guess for us, I echo other comments. I think it's better for us all to be in the same place. And for now, that seems to be Zoom. I think splitting us up would be confusing. Mr. Urban's comments about just the technical coordination and complexity, I think, you know, opens us up to more issues and delays and confusion. I think one of the things that I've heard through the last couple months as we've been in real time, kind of redefining how we engage as a civic body and engage our citizens, is that predictability and communication and knowing, what it is and how they can do it is the most important. So I would feel most comfortable making, saying through June, we're going to continue with this so that we can communicate adequately. It sounds like there's new information coming down the pike. And so maybe in 2 weeks when we have our next study session, we can reassess where we are with new information. But I feel like for our citizens, the best thing we can do is say for the month of June, we're going to keep doing this, as well as add the option for citizens to come and speak in person at City Hall, if that's a better conduit for them. But I think, again, the best thing we can do is give our citizens, advance notice, predictability, and less confusion about where they need to be. And when we make the decision, make it so we've got enough advance warning for any of our quasi judicials, like for us to be able to say, in 3 weeks, we will commence this. So I feel like right now our best option is to stick with what we're doing, add the in-person option at City Hall for citizens, and reassess when we have more information.
Thank you, Ms. Dozeman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would agree completely with all of the points that Ms. Hulteen just made. And I just have a little bit of a clarification as far as like masks and the requirement for social distancing when we're all wearing masks. Because I would much rather prefer to be meeting in person, especially for public hearings. But on the other hand, I've also noticed that people who don't regularly participate in in-person meetings have had the opportunity to call in and give their input on these Zoom meetings. So while some have said that this has really been inopportune and inaccessible to some, I've actually kind of noticed it on the other hand that people who normally wouldn't participate have been able to. So I don't think that we can really say definitively that having Zoom meetings and allowing people to call in and participate in the Zoom meetings has really disabled people from participating, because I've actually seen that it's enabled them to participate. So those are just kind of my thoughts, and I really appreciate the idea of citizens participating in person at City Hall and us allowing to see that. I think that is a great compromise as far as having our Zoom meetings, having all of the council members in one place. We know the platform that we are all on and how the people can see us, but then they also understand that not only can they participate on our Zoom meetings and call in, but they can also give their statements at the podium. So I really want to thank you all for testing this out and being so adaptive and like you guys have been very mobile and pivoting as much as possible. And I wanted to share with you a local business owner that I spoke to this week about when I went to go get some food. They said that they really lost hope in a lot of how the governments have handled the situation, but they felt our city and particularly our city staff has handled this so well that they've been very informative, they've been accessible, and they've helped out as much as they possibly can. So I just really want to give kudos to all of our city staff, because you guys have done a phenomenal job in not only being there for us, but also being there for the community and getting information out quickly, and have a lot of clarity for people to know, what's expected of them and how you guys can help. So I just want to give you a lot of kudos for everything that you guys have put in place. Thank you.
Thanks, Leah. Appreciate that.
Thank you.
Well, unless there's I'm sorry. Yeah.
That gives you clarity on where we're going.
It does, unless there's any more comments. Well, thank you very much. We'll move forward with moving forward as stated, and at least through June, and reassess when we get more information from the health departments. And one other quick thing on the City Hall side, I think we've been doing a great job providing customer service virtually as much as we can, but we're phasing in starting on June 16th. We're going to provide opportunities again for citizens who maybe can't get customer service virtually to schedule an appointment to meet with staff at City Hall. We're going to start with just on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday because that's when court is in session. And we're going to have morning hours and afternoon hours shutting down during midday to do some disinfecting and cleaning. And we'll have some workstations in the lobby where folks can set an appointment if they need to meet with staff in person. Again, just trying to provide another opportunity for our citizens. We think we're doing a pretty good job actually virtually, but there may be some that may need to meet with staff face to face. So we're going to make that happen starting on June 16th.
Very good. Ms. Weaver.
Thank you so much, Mr. Goff, for all of that. I was just curious, regardless of whether we have an ordinance for masks continuing or not, can the city require that everyone be masked in city offices?
We can, and employees have to be still by government or state orders.
Okay.
We're going to sign City Hall buildings and facilities that we're requesting that everybody wears a mask.
Okay.
And we'll provide those masks if they don't have one. We're not going to get in a drag out fight with people if that they refuse. And we'll help them as quickly as we can and ask them to leave once they're done.
Yeah.
But I don't want to put employees in between folks that may not want to wear a mask.
Exactly.
I think if you're going around our community, it's amazing. I think 99% of people are wearing masks and respecting that. So I don't think we'll have an issue.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Thank you. Anything further on your staff report, Mr. Goff?
That's it. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you so much. We have an opportunity for elected officials matters at this time. If there anyone that has anything they'd like to say, and after this is done, we're going to take a short break and then come back for our special meeting. So probably an opportunity after that to do something. Mr. Urban.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a quick update. The applications are due on Friday for the Business Stabilization Grant Program. And we'll make a determination towards the end of the week whether we're going to extend that deadline depending on the number of applicants we've received. We received quite a few new applicants towards the end of the week last week, and so we'll see where we are in the midweek as to whether or not we need to extend the deadline. But at this point, we're expecting the deadline to hit on Friday at noon.
Thank you. Any other matters to come before us right now? Ms. Hulteen and then Ms. Hutchinson.
Thank you. I just have a question regarding the executive order that Patrick's operating under. We had enacted that, I believe, in March. And I'm just wondering if there is a benefit to revisiting that at some point. Now that we're kind of seeing the pattern at which information is coming out of the state and the county and some of the patterns that we're operating under as a governing body. So I would just be curious if anyone has a thought on that and if that's something that we should maybe think about looking at again soon.
Well, that's a question for discussion. Is there a discussion on that item?
I would just add to that, it's important that we have an emergency declaration in place. I'm not suggesting Ms. Hulteen saying that we repeal it or anything, but to get federal funding, we need to have an emergency declaration in place. We can certainly look at it and make any changes that you would like to make. Right now, it's in place until the governor rescinds the state health order, public health order, or city council rescinds it, whatever comes first. So I would just encourage you, recommend to keep something in place as long as we can so that we continue receiving federal funding.
Yeah, thank you. It wasn't insinuated at all that we rescind it. It's just if there's other, if there's aspects about it that need to be revised to serve you, Patrick, or that we've learned about, I just want to throw out there that I don't want to lose track of that.
Okay, we'll take a look at it and see.
Thank you, Ms. Hutchinson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think it's important to keep that in place because with what's going on downtown, public health is usually a couple weeks behind on assessing exactly what's going on. And I think we're in a good place with that right now. I also would like to thank the Wheat Ridge Police Lakewood SWAT team for help that they did downtown, or if they're continuing to do that. It's just very scary times. I've been here 51 years, never thought I would see this here in Denver at all. And it's very scary for me and other people that I know, and it's serious. So thank you.
Thank you. Any other elected officials reports at this time? Any other business come before our study session?
Maybe just to respond,
Okay.
just real quickly to Ms. Hutchinson, the SWAT team, Wheat Ridge and Lakewood SWAT team did go back to Denver this afternoon, to be on standby in case needed. Haven't heard anything from the chief, so I'm assuming everything's going well. And everybody did come home safe from Saturday night.
Okay, good. Okay, thank you all very much. It's about 20 minutes after. Why don't we take about a 5-minute break? We'll reconvene at about 8:25 and have our special meeting. So we'll see you in about 5 minutes. am I on? Okay, call to order the special city council meeting for the city of Wheat Ridge, Colorado for June 1st, 2020. I would like to call the meeting to order. Ally, do we have the flag available and Jesse for the Pledge of Allegiance?
Stand by 1 second, Mayor. Thank you for reminding us. Jesse, are you able to play the flag for us tonight for the special meeting?
There it is.
So good.
All right. Well, if you would all stand up and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Will the clerk please call the roll of the members?
Janice Hoppy,
Present.
Judy Hutchinson,
Present.
Zachary Urban,
Present.
Rachel Hulteen,
Present.
Amanda Weaver,
Here.
Corey Stites,
Present.
Leah Dozeman,
Here.
Valerie Nussler-Beck.
Present.
All members of the council are present, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. We do not have approval, we do not have minutes in our package for tonight. We will have those at our next meeting a week from today. Without objection, the approval of the agenda will stand as presented. I would like to open it up for citizens' right to speak on any item not on the agenda. If there's any members of our public out there who would like to speak at this meeting, now is an opportunity to speak. We are meeting in a virtual format tonight. All of the public has been, pardon me, unmuted at this time. And if you would like to speak, please unmute your own device and ask to be recognized, and I will recognize you. You please give us your first name and your last name. If you would spell your last name for the record, give us your address, and you'll have 3 minutes to speak. Is there any member of the public now who would like to speak under citizens' right to speak? If once again, if there's anyone out there tonight who would like to speak under citizens' right to speak on any item not on the agenda, please please speak up and I will recognize you. I see someone perhaps at telephone number ending in 1340. Do you wish to speak tonight?
No.
Thank you. Is there anyone else with us tonight who would like to speak under citizens' right to speak? I don't hear anyone, so I'm going to close citizens' right to speak. And we will go to, let's see, we don't have any consent agenda. We don't have any public hearings. We don't have any ordinance on first reading. So we are under decisions, resolutions, and motions. And we have agenda item number 1. Ms. Hoppy, would you please introduce agenda item number 1?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Resolution 30-2020, a resolution of the Wheat Ridge City Council extending the requirement for the wearing of face coverings in critical businesses. At issue, City Council approved a resolution on April 27th, 2020, ordering customers of critical businesses as defined by the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment to wear face coverings. That order expires on May 30th, 2020. At the study session on May 18th, consensus was reached to include a resolution extending the order to June 14th, 2020 on the June 1st business meeting to receive citizen input and for further City Council discussion.
Thank you. Mr. Goff, do we have a staff presentation on this item? You're on mute.
Yep, sorry, thank you. I think that the issue statement is a pretty good introduction. Mr. Dahl is on the call, and he does have a few comments he would like to make on this this resolution.
Okay, Mr. Dahl, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of council. I assume you can hear me?
Yes, we can.
Very good. A couple of things regarding the prior resolution, and to the extent council is considering extending it, you should be aware of. First, the prior resolution referred to the third amended health order. There's since May 14th order, there's been a new one. And so that would have to be changed to the fourth amended public health order. That's just a detail, but one of the impacts of the switch or the change from the third to the fourth is that, as council's well aware, there are now some non-critical businesses that are permitted to be open to customers. Restaurants, for example, as of May 27th, and there's a whole host of other businesses. When council enacted the resolution the first time, we were just looking at critical businesses that were open, and so and within those businesses, customers were not required to wear masks by that order. Now there's a much broader list of businesses that are allowed to be open, and so while it's up to council to make a choice around if it wants to extend the order, right now the prior order requires customers in critical businesses to wear masks. Well, of course, now a lot of businesses are open. Interestingly, the fourth amended order carries forward prior language requiring employees in all these businesses, critical and non-critical, retail, restaurants, while employees must wear masks. The amended order carries forward the permissive requirement that customers are encouraged to wear masks, and that employers are required to encourage the customers to wear masks, but are not in the position of requiring them to wear masks. So, of course, what the council did last time, which was to fill in that gap, if you will, to go from a permissive to a mandatory requirement for customers, that gap still exists. But the point I think I'm trying to make, and I think you can appreciate, is that same gap now applies to a much greater range of businesses that are now available to be open to the public. So as the council considers whether to extend its mandatory mask order for customers in businesses, it will need to also determine whether it wants the scope of that order to follow the scope of the businesses that are now open to the public. Whereas in the past, it applied only to critical businesses because those are the only ones that were open then. But of course, it's now changed. You can appreciate why I wanted you to think about sort of now the potential breadth of the extension of an order, and it's the policy call for you, but I wanted you to understand sort of what the current regulatory landscape is and can assist in your discussion. Thanks. That's all I've got.
Thank you. Before we go to questions of council, I would like to open this up to any comments from the public under citizens' right to speak on this particular agenda item. If there's anyone from the public who would like to speak on this issue, you may do so at this time. If you wish to speak, please unmute yourself and ask to speak, and I will recognize you.
I'd like to speak.
Okay, please introduce yourself. Give us your first name and your last name and your address, and then you will have 3 minutes.
Thank you. My name's Jay Kenny. I'm a business owner and cider maker in Wheat Ridge. I think I'm Wheat Ridge's only cider operation. We're considered a critical business, and we're at 4965 Irish Street. I support the resolution to require any customers coming in to wear masks, the extension, and if there's another extension, I'm going to support that as well. I want myself, all of our employees to be safe. And I think, as everybody knows, the issue is that you have asymptomatic people who can spread the virus. You can look perfectly healthy and be a major source of viral spread. So this is both a personal issue, and I think it's also, for the city council, an important issue in terms of money that you are, I hope, about to spend on me and other businesses like me to help us get open and reopen and resume paying a lot more in sales tax than we've been paying the last 3 months. If you're going to invest money in us, please protect us. That's all I have. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Are there any other members of the public tonight who would like to speak on this agenda item number 1? You may do so now. Okay, I don't hear any more public comments forthcoming, so I would like to go to questions from council and recognize Ms. Weaver.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, council, for letting me speak. I'm having a emergency at the farm, so I may have to get off the call in a bit. I would like to support continuing the mask ordinance, and if not for all businesses, I would really appreciate it. And as we think about all of our population, especially those that are vulnerable. I'm a caretaker for a mother in her 80s, and so I have to be extremely careful about where I am and that everyone's masks. And as an essential worker with delivering food, I also have to be very careful. So I am always masked outside this house and gloved, and I feel I agree with the caller who just called in, that it is the not only polite thing to do, but I've been reading many scientific reports about this, and the masks really keep those people that have it from spreading it in many ways. So I would ask that the council support continuing the mask ordinance. I am not sure what to do about bars and restaurants. I recognize that is a really difficult issue. I would just ask that we really consider for those people who really need those masks to be in place, those that are over an age limit that are vulnerable, and those that are immune compromised, that at least essential services, buying food, going to the pharmacy, things like that we require masks for those services. Thanks.
Thank you, and good luck with the goats. Additional discussion from council, Ms. Hoppy.
I just have a few clarifying questions, and I'll save my discussion items till after a motion. But as I read the memo, the way I understood it was that through the public health order, employees are required to wear masks, and that's employees of critical businesses and also personal services. And then customers of personal services are required to wear a mask. And so I want to make sure that I have that clear, that that's true. And then I also wanted to ask, I was under the impression that the in-place dining was that you had to wear your mask into your seat and out of your seat and when you're moving around the restaurant, but not when you are at your table engaging in eating and drinking. So I just want to clarify if that's correct.
That's all of that is correct.
Additional discussion. Ms. Dozman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So we keep framing this as an extension, but technically the mask order ended on May 30th. And so it has expired as of today. So would we need to frame it as a new resolution, or how do we go about that?
Mr. Dahl?
It's set up as a new resolution. I appreciate your making that point, and in preparing it for the packet, I realized that you're right, it expired. So the resolution that's in your packet says it extends the requirement, but it's a new resolution. And the fact that it's not in force right now wouldn't really matter. If you approve it, it's effective immediately, and so would have been a gap of a day or two.
Again, Ms. Dozman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I think my biggest issue all along has really been the messaging and how confusing it has been to the public. And so when we went from a mandatory order that carried a misdemeanor offense to a voluntary compliant resolution passed by council, and now to whatever we decide to go with. It's really been unclear, and so I think the perception has really carried with the public as far as Wheat Ridge being very heavy-handed in requiring masks, and that has been the message that has been very prevalent on social media. And I think that has really hurt us and potentially hurt our businesses as far as people deciding not to patronize those businesses. And so my concern with this whole thing is not even now it's voluntary as far as compliance goes, and yet the perception is still out there in the public that it's mandatory. So if we choose to extend this, I just want the messaging to be very, very clear that it's voluntary. And I know that some businesses want to be able to point to the government as requiring this, but I think that our resources are much more needed in other areas, especially given the circumstances that have unfolded in the last week. And so I don't want to put the onus onto our police department. I think the responsibility and the onus needs to be on the public and the businesses. And so if that is going to be our messaging moving forward, I just want that to be very clear and concise and black and white that it's voluntary.
Thank you. Additional discussion? Mr. Stites.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So just to clarify, right now the order is written, if it were to pass tonight, is only for critical businesses such as grocery stores, things like that. Without taking any action, we're not adding in retail establishments, anything like that.
That's correct, because it mirrors your original order, which was critical businesses.
Okay. Just to clarify, the Jeffco Public Health Authority, their stance on this is it's recommended, correct? That's what Dr. Johnson said here a couple weeks ago. And I believe the CDC has it recommended. So I just think that kind of like what Ms. Dozeman said, we just need to be real careful and real clear as to what we're requiring, when we're requiring it, why, and I guess for how long. And I'd kind of like to know what metric we're going to use to decide that this is something that we're no longer going to require, no longer going to request. Is there a certain number that we're going to hit? I think that typically we're going off of what Jeffco and the CDC and everybody else is using. So, and I don't think any of us are doctors, or well, some of us are doctors, but not that kind of a doctor. So I'm just interested to know, when do we decide that we're not going to continue to order? And I'm not saying that it's not a good idea to wear a mask, and I don't think it, and it's something I certainly do. When do we as a government decide that we're going to stop telling people they need to wear a mask, and when does it become personal responsibility?
Ms. Nosler-Beck.
Sorry, some people have dogs bugging them, and I have a 3-year-old bugging me. Coco, I need you to go talk to your dad. I just wanted to also say, in the same way that Councilwoman Dozeman brought up, that like communication is so important here. And if we decide to not go forward with the mask order, I think it's as important for us to message that correctly, that we're not saying it's a free-for-all for people to not wear masks in Wheat Ridge too. And so I realize that heading into this vote on what we're going to do either way, we've made a lot of headway. People like Patrick, you were talking about, I've seen it, people are wearing masks and they're doing this. And it's not because I think that it's because of the enforcement of the resolution that we passed, but I think it has a lot to do with people, concerned for their neighbors and for their own health and safety, and for the employees and businesses. And I think it's really important that we make sure that if we decide to not extend this, we also are being very clear that we still encourage people to wear their masks when they are in businesses to protect the employees who are here and all of our residents and our businesses.
Thank you. Additional discussion will go to Ms. Hulteen and then Mr. Urban.
Thank you. I'm just wondering if anyone has any information on what surrounding communities are doing. If I remember correctly, last time we discussed this, Denver, theirs was extending through June 15th because our date is June 15th on this particular ordinance. So if anyone staff has information on what other cities are doing, that would be greatly appreciated.
And I'm sorry, I don't have all that information. That June 14th or 15th date was, I think I misspoke when I talked about this last week. That date refers to when the governor extended his emergency declaration. It wasn't an extension of a mask order. So I'm not sure what Denver's doing on their mask order at this time. I can research real quickly here.
Okay, thank you. And we will go to Mr. Urban.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think that as we look at what other jurisdictions are doing with respect to the mask order, the pertinent jurisdiction that is relevant to this discussion is the Jefferson County Public Health Department, because they're the experts in what we're talking about here. None of us could possibly be even close to being the expert that they are in this realm, and we as a city do not have our own public health department for that very reason, because they are the experts. And as much as they have the absolute authority to institute their own mask order, they have chosen to limit that recommendation. They've chosen to limit that to a recommendation as opposed to an absolute order. And so I would encourage us to move the language in this resolution. It's not an ordinance, it's a resolution that we're passing here tonight, that it be a recommendation that we encourage our residents to wear a mask. That I think is a clearer, putting us in parallel with what our public health department is saying, as opposed to giving people different directions from different bodies as to what to do and what not to do. And the reasons that I'm asking for this to be a recommendation are twofold, or at least twofold, if not more than that. Number one, for dining services, the recommendation that we wear the mask up to the table, then when we get to the table, we take them off, and then we put our left hand in and do the hokey pokey. It just sounds like people won't want to go to restaurants if we give them this sort of rigmarole on how to wear masks in and out of the restaurant. If the restaurant wants them to wear masks, the restaurant will tell them how they should do that. I don't see anything in here about how this applies to restaurants. So that's the first one. The second one is we can't order residents to wear a mask into a bank, but banks won't open. And banks are considering opening at this point in time. So we have to exclude them from this because we can't keep people from their money by law. And so that's another concern. And to Councilmember Steit's point, we don't have any direct evidence to the impact or the metrics that we're using or the science that we're using within the city of Wheat Ridge as it relates to the impact that the mask order has had to this point. We've had it in place. We've had it for critical businesses, and it feels good that we're doing it because it feels like we're actually doing something to help people, but we don't have any direct evidence or metrics that tells us that this is moving the ball forward or protecting the residents. So I would encourage us to move towards a recommendation and removing the word order from this order. We can still issue this order as a recommendation. We can use the word order in the context of what this is, but it's not, but we should change the language in the resolution to recommended versus ordered. That's my thought.
Thank you. Additional discussion? Ms. Hutchinson and then Ms. Nosler-Beck.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. When I look at the motion, I see extending the requirement for the wearing of face coverings. I don't see order. But I walk around the city with my dog almost every day, and I am amazed. I talk to people. I don't do social media. So I talk to people. They praise Wheat Ridge for their action on going ahead and wanting to take care of their citizens and the people who are working in businesses. I see on businesses, I see signs, no mask, we don't serve you. Okay, that's pretty plain. Okay, just like no shirt, no shoes, whatever, they say that. So they are concerned about their own employees, but they also are concerned about the people who come in. We don't know where these people have come from or where they are. If they're doing social distancing, you can be asymptomatic. It's prophylactic kind of prevention that is being done. The one thing we do know, we are not seeing an exacerbation of the COVID in this area. The hospitalizations are down, and that is a good thing. We're practicing prevention. So if you don't want to wear a mask and a business says you need to wear a mask, then you don't go in there. If in a restaurant you don't want to wear a mask, then don't go in there. You know, that's what they're saying. So I'm supporting keep wearing the masks. And as far as I'm concerned, till the end of the month, we have no idea what's going to happen with what's going on downtown and things. There's a curfew right now. I got a text, 9 o'clock curfew. So it's just being safe. If you don't want to do it, then don't do it. You're not going to get, you know, arrested or anything like that, but you need to stay away from people also. Thank you.
Thank you. I have Ms. Nosler back and then Mr. Stites.
I wanted to chime in. I do support the moving forward with this resolution with changing the language to recommendation. And then I also just wanted to talk about when it would potentially end, if we wanted to put a date in there. There are some really great resources through the state of Colorado, through CDPHE and Department of Human Services, where they give really good guidelines as to what like safer at home means. And then like the next phase is protect your neighbor. And I think where Governor Polis landed today is that we're going to be in safer at home until July 1. Am I right on that, Patrick or Ali? Oh, you're on mute, Patrick.
All right, his executive order just came out late, right before the meeting started, so I haven't had a chance to look at it.
That's what I was looking at it too. So we have kind of a clear idea that once we kind of hit that June 27th, July 1 kind of time frame, we could be heading into a second phase, which is this protect your neighbors. And to me, that seems like if we're operating off of these phases anyway, and that's what's dictating what we're doing, would be the next step as to where, or I'm sorry, the kind of timeline that we could be working from.
Thank you. Mr. Stites.
Well, I just kind of like to thank Ms. Hutchinson. She made, I think, most of the points for us a little bit on this, that it really is up to the businesses no matter what. We can say ordered, we can say recommend, we can say request, but if the police are not going to show up to stop you from not wearing a mask, then really it is up to the businesses. And if they want to put their I don't know, their livelihood on the line and say yes mask, no mask, and really enforce that the way that they want to, I think that should be up to the businesses at this point. But I do agree with Ms. Nosler-Beck. I think recommend is a much better word, and I think that if we use the word recommend, I would support actually taking this from June 15th to the end of the safer at home order at June 27th or July 1st, or whatever it is. If it's recommend, if it's not, I would not support it.
Thank you. Ms. Hobby.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Because we have been now in a lot of discussion and that motion has not yet been made, I'd like to ask if I can make my motion.
Please proceed.
Thank you. I move to approve resolution number 30-2020, a resolution of the Wheat Ridge City Council extending the requirement for wearing face masks in critical businesses with the following amendments. Section 1A, change the word order to be requested. Section 1B, change the date to June 22nd, Monday. And also it refers to the most recent amended public health order.
Second.
Okay, we'll have discussion on the motion. Ms. Hoppy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The reason why I had put June 22nd in instead of July 1st is because June 22nd is actually a business meeting for City Council, and therefore we wouldn't end up in a position where we have to have a study session and another special business meeting. And so I felt scheduling wise that was the best way for us to move forward with this. In the beginning of July starts with another study session. So it would either have to go in past July 1st or on the 22nd, and then we review it on the 22nd for it to be at a business meeting.
I have a question on that, if I might, Ms. Hoppy. Would that expire at 12:01 a.m. on the 22nd or at 11:59 p.m. on that date, so that we could get it into the meeting without it being expired?
Let me double check what it says specifically.
And we just found out, Mr. Mayor, that the governor's order goes through June 30th, if that matters.
I'm going to ask Mr. Dull. I don't see a time.
And I guess I think your intention is that the order would not expire before our business meeting. Is that the extension? Is that the intention?
Yeah,
and
so that we can do business at a business meeting instead of at the end of tacked on to the end of a study session.
Mr. Dahl, would we need to provide a different time of day to match the 22nd?
Right now it's set up for midnight on June 14th, but if you change that to June 22nd, it'll be midnight. To be hopefully long after your meeting is complete, and it's set up for immediate effectiveness.
Okay.
While I have Ms. Hoppy, in section 1A, you might want to address the scope of the order, because of course the fourth amended order still refers to critical businesses, but now we have more businesses that are encouraged, that are open in various ways. You might consider, because if it's just critical businesses, that's going to be only one slice now of kind of the landscape out there. You might consider just generalizing it. Any business establishment permitted to be open to the public under the fourth amended order.
As I understand it, the governor already has covered employees of critical businesses, persons offering personal services, haircuts, dog grooming, nails, and people who are getting personal services. So it seems to me like only people who are going into critical businesses is the one that's missing in the gap. However, to be more clear, I would be happy to add that amendment unless somebody else wants to add that amendment.
Mr. Urban.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would be willing to add that amendment as long as we had a caveat that excluded financial institutions from the order, because I don't think we can even request that residents wear a mask into a bank at this point. And that's more of a safety concern, I think, than anything at this point. So banks should be able to come up with a way that they want to handle business on their own, but I don't want to necessarily request that residents wear a mask into a bank.
Banks are independently required to encourage customers to wear masks. Is true now.
Say that again.
Banks are presently required by the present orders to encourage customers to wear masks. I mean, they're within the category of business, like a lot of other businesses that are requested to encourage that, but not to require it.
Okay, well, as long as you're okay with the way it reads and its intersection with banks right now, you're fine with that, Mr. Dahl?
Yes, it would be a departure if whatever the city did were to somehow require customers and banks to wear masks. And as you've described it in the motion, that's not what you're doing.
Okay. Yeah, so I would be willing to make the motion to amend as it relates to what Mr. Dahl said with respect to all businesses.
Is that, is that made as a friendly amendment? Okay, so, and then I guess we need if that's a motion, we need a second on the motion before we get into discussion. Let me get a second on the motion first, and then we can start discussing the motion.
Councilmember Urban seconded it, I believe.
Oh, did he? Okay, thank you so much. Ms. Hutchinson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I went into Belco today and they are wearing masks. They only allow 2 people in at a time, and it states on the door you must wear a mask.
Wow.
So that's that. But also on June 22nd, that is also a public hearing. If we're going to, I don't know if we got there, that possibly that could be where people go into City Hall or not. They're not going to go in there if, you know, they're not going to be able to wear a mask. So I think we should go to the end of the month as far as our masks. Thank you.
Ms. Hulteen.
Thank you, Mayor. Would we be able to, if we're moving forward recommendation for masks, would we be able to require that they post the recommendation? Because what I've observed is what has made a huge impact and increased the compliance with the mask wearing is when you walk into businesses, there is a sign on the window that states that the masks are required. You go into any grocery store and they've got a freestanding sign that you have to walk by. So I think part of this is, and I think it was maybe Ms. Dozeman who was talking about the communication aspect. You know, the minute we start softening this and it's not being communicated, I think what we're losing is the level of compliance. And what I've heard from my neighbors, and we saw in the comments both through Wheat Ridge Speaks and Mr. Kenny, who, you know, is representing his business, is that some businesses, you know, they're wanting to protect their employees, but they're hearing from their customers that they appreciate being able to patronize businesses with high level of compliance. So if we're moving towards recommendation, can we actually require a posting of the recommendation? I have no idea like where that falls.
You know, I'll start maybe. I think it might be difficult to require through this resolution. I don't know, maybe Mr. Dahl has a different opinion that a business puts a sign up, but we've been shipping those, the current signs out. We've created signs and we've been shipping those to businesses as much as possible. That's why you see so many signs up now, and we would still do that, but I'll leave it up to Mr. Dahl if we can require it.
Well, you're allowed to be more stringent than the state orders. I mean, that really was the basis for your original order. But having said that, I agree with Mr. Goff that if the idea is messaging to the public, then the city providing signs to businesses is probably going to go a whole lot further than the city requiring a resolution that signs be posted. Because again, you're probably not going to go around to businesses, ticket them for not posting. So it's, you certainly could, you have the power to say in the resolution, you shall post signs that are provided to you by the city. Or you can just encourage or authorize Mr. Goff to continue to provide signs as provided by the city. You can require it in the resolution. I just don't think you're probably going to go out and ticket for it. So I'm not sure that that's a place to use the political capital, if you will, rather than just providing lots of stuff.
Okay, well, if it's good impact, I guess I'd like to consider, and maybe I need a little help on the formality of this, but including in there that we recommend they post the recommendation. I know that's a little redundant, but again, the communication piece is just really strong, and I think will help people feel more comfortable. And I have a lot of neighbors that still are not comfortable going to businesses, and fewer people wearing masks are going to make them less comfortable. So I just want to do everything I can for my neighbors to feel like they can patronize local businesses and for businesses to be able to capture as many of our neighbors as possible. So, so Janice, is that something that I would do as a motion? How would I, or?
You would do it as an amendment, and my suggestion is that you would say section 1, add a letter E, and then make that your amendment.
Okay, then I'd like to propose an amendment, section 1, letter E, that we include a recommendation that businesses post the recommendation to wear masks in the business.
Mr. Dahl, would that, language-wise, would that be better if City Council is requiring businesses to post the recommendation to
sure.
wear masks?
I heard Councilmember Hulteen's motion to be that the city recommends, though, that I didn't hear a requirement. So I think as she stated, it probably works. Maybe it would be a little shorter to say we recommend that businesses post signs encouraging the wearing of masks in the form provided by the city, since the city's out there manufacturing signs. I think Mr. Goff is doing that.
Before we get there, let's get a second on the amendment. Is there a second to the amendment by Ms. Hulteen?
Second.
Okay, so we have an amendment and a second. Now we can discuss the amendment. Ms. Dozeman.
Patrick, could you maybe speak to the messaging, whether there would be an emphasis on that it's a recommendation or a request, whichever language we decide to go with, as opposed to an order or a requirement?
Well, sure. If council changes that tonight by these motions, that it's a recommendation, that's the language we'll use, and we'll make sure that we change all of our messaging on all of our social media, so that it's clear.
Okay, and then how would that impact businesses as far as, I mean, I've seen quite a few restaurants and the grocery stores as well putting up signs on their doors as far as we were just requiring masks and therefore they're adhering to that. Like, would we send that new messaging out to businesses and therefore update any of that signage, or how would we go about that?
Yeah, we'll do our best to get it to as many businesses as possible. We were just emailing a copy of the signs, and we'll make a new sign and they can print it out and put it up themselves. We'll hand deliver it to those businesses that need one. We'll work through our different business groups to get the word out. There are some businesses that are making it mandatory, and that's their decision. And so they may have their own sign up that says that. So there's going to be, there could be some confusion because of that. The city may recommend it, but some businesses are making it mandatory. So just keep that in mind.
Well, and I think that really goes to the point of, putting that responsibility on the business and letting them make that decision on their own. I think it is really confusing coming from a state order versus a county order versus a local municipality order, and the fact that many other surrounding cities haven't followed our suit in requiring this. And so I think there's going to be a lot of confusion, but I think the one thing that I really appreciate about being a local official is that our accessibility is much higher than that of, say, the state government or the federal government. So, I have people texting me, I have people calling me, I have people emailing me, and I think that we can speak to the needs of our community and our businesses and our constituents much better than higher up levels of government. And so, having those exemptions or allowing that freedom for people to speak for themselves, for businesses to decide for themselves, is something that I really appreciate about local government. And so while I agree and have been wearing a mask outdoors, mostly because of the perception, and being mindful of others as opposed to myself, because quite frankly, I am really uncomfortable wearing a mask. I am quite claustrophobic. I don't wear turtlenecks. I rarely wear necklaces. And so having masks on for long periods of time really bothers me. And I know that other people feel that way too, maybe have medical conditions in which they cannot wear masks. And so really deciding and allowing for people to decide for themselves whether, you know, it's a necessity, and for businesses being allowed to mandate for themselves as well, especially given the hardships that they have faced in this situation. So I would definitely support the language of recommend as opposed to order, and thus not requiring any longer. So those are just kind of my thoughts as far as the masks. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hoppy.
I just wanted to mention, because many people reached out to me and said that they support extending the requirement, the order for the masks, and more rather than against. And what I want to say to those people is that it didn't feel as though we were going to be able to get an order all the way through. So I feel like the changing the word from order to requested at least gives us something, and it doesn't leave everybody high and dry that was feeling like they were supported and felt safe behind the original resolution.
Thank you. Additional discussion on the amendment? Okay, we are ready to vote on the amendment. Ms. Hulteen, you made that amendment. Can you or go ahead?
I had my hand up. Can you not see me?
I'm sorry. I guess I thought you were still tending to the kids.
You
Please.
all have been in the barn with me, and I've got 2 little babies, and a friend who came to help. I guess I just want to remind everybody, I have a really hard time with, I understand it's uncomfortable to wear a mask. We're in the middle of a pandemic, a global pandemic. And yes, while I feel like we can recommend, and I certainly hope we do that, I really hope that everybody thinks about that masks are being required around the world because we're still in a pandemic and we don't have a vaccine. And I guess I feel stronger and stronger about this every day, simply because I am working around vulnerable populations, and everything I do, I have to wear a mask to protect me, but also to protect other people. And I guess that's all I'll say. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, is there any other discussion on the amendment? And Ms. Hulteen, that amendment was to recommend that businesses post the resolution or to that effect?
Yeah, that businesses, we recommend that businesses post the recommendation.
Okay, all those in favor of the amendment, raise your hand, and if the clerk would please count the votes. Those in favor.
Mr. Mayor, the amendment has been adopted by a vote of 7-1, with Mr. Stites voting no.
Okay.
No?
No.
I'm sorry, you're on mute, Mr. Stites. Oh, I'm sorry, Leah. I missed you. I apologize. The amendment was passed 6-2 with Council Members Stites and Dozeman voting no.
Okay, thank you. So we are back to discussion on the main motion as amended. Is there further discussion on the main motion as amended? Mr. Stites.
I think in section 1 it says request. Can we substitute the word request for recommend so that it matches up with the county order and the national order? I know I can make an amendment to do that, but is there support to do that? I guess would be a question that I have.
I feel like the word request is stronger than recommended. So that's why I use the word request.
Okay, is there further discussion on the motion as amended? Okay, let us go to a vote. All in favor of the motion as amended, please raise your hand, and will the clerk please tally the votes?
This is the main motion?
Yes.
This is the main motion as amended.
Can we make sure that everybody remembers what that main motion is? Changing the word order to requested, changing the date to June 22nd, and refer to the most recent health order and include all businesses. And then as amended.
Okay, so that is the motion. All in favor of the motion as amended, please raise your hand.
Mr. Mayor, the motion has passed 6-2. Once again, Mr. Stites and Ms. Dozeman voting no.
Okay. That was all that we had on agenda item number 1. Thank you for your discussion. We will now go to city managers matters. Anything additional, Mr. Goff?
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, sir.
If I may, Ms. Hoppy, because people will want to know exactly what we passed first thing in the morning, if you wouldn't mind giving me a call after we adjourn so I have exactly the right language here. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. So, Mr. Goff.
Nothing else tonight, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you so much. Mr. Dahl, city attorney's matters.
Nothing tonight, thank you.
Thank you. We will go to elected officials matters, and why don't we do this by hand? If you have something that you would like to offer, please raise your hand and I'll call on you. Ms. Dozeman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I would just like to recognize what has been going on for the last week in the aftermath of the death of George Floyd at the hands of a police officer kneeling on his neck for an agonizing 9 minutes. Most people have, of course, seen the video, and there's been a lot of subsequent posts, protests, riots after dark, which we have given permission for our police officers to stand aside the other law enforcement officers. And I just want to speak as a council member about our position in the communities and being able to pass systemic legislation, systemic change, and really, lend our voice in our positions in order to not only listen and learn, but hear the community of people of color. And I think that most politics is local, and we're very accessible, and we are in a unique position to allow ourselves to start that change. And so I really appreciated Chief Murtha putting the statement out today. And so I just want to give kudos to not only our police department in really addressing these issues and allowing for more training. I know we've spoken about body cams in the past, and our former chief of police, Dan Brennan, spoke to the unique training that the Wheat Ridge Police Department has in de-escalation services, our tactics. And so I really want to not only commend our police department, but also say that we stand with the community in facing these issues. And while I may not personally understand and be able to relate to them, that I see them and I recognize them, and I've really just been trying to take it in this last week and tried to figure out how it is that I can be a mover of change and disrupt the systemic racism that does exist in our society. So I just wanted to make that recognition, and I wanted to just really send out my condolences to George Floyd and his family, and really just try to lend support to the community and bringing us together and making a real difference. And that's only going to be possible if we come together as one and unite and make a change. So thank you.
Thank you. Additional elected officials matters. Okay, well, we will wrap up our business. I'd like to thank all those individuals with staff and guests who joined us today. I'd like to thank the members of the public who joined us. Thank all of our counselors for your diligence in doing the work of the city. I once again want to thank our dedicated city staff for putting this meeting together, for being able to do the work to open up our council chambers to citizens who may wish to speak their voices there, because we appreciate hearing their voices. And it's through the group effort of all of us together that we make decisions, and we make better decisions when we listen to everyone out there. So it's a hard time. It's a strange time, but we are conquering it. We are getting better. We're getting healthier. Wash your hands. Stay safe, and thank you for being here. We'll adjourn this meeting. Good night.